So we're going to start with what we know. What we do know is that there was a chemical attack of some type, and it included, or it caused the death of 52 adults and 20 children, and this was the total as of yesterday. I'm not sure if the total has gone up since yesterday, and this was in the Idlib province, and it occurred on Tuesday. What we as citizens and most journalists, I would say probably 99% of journalists, don't know is exactly, and actually before I finish that sentence, what we have not directly seen with our own eyes is evidence to support who actually did it. And I start that way because I approach every conversation as a skeptic. That's what we should do. But at a certain level, we are not going to get that information as individuals, as journalists. Perhaps media as a whole could pressure some actual information and evidence out. But for the most part, we are at the mercy of institutions that do this type of review, that look at this information, that disseminate this information and determine where the source of an attack came from. Now, what we do know so far is that the attack was chemical, and it's most likely from sarin gas. It has killed women. It has killed children. And it has happened within a province that was surrounded by rebel forces, but it took place inside of a city that did not contain the rebel forces. So it was more civilian casualties than anything else. That's what we know for certain at this point. There are questions in the minds of the general community as to who did it. What is surprising is that the president of the United States, who has so boldly previously come out against any conversation about regime change, any conversation about using military force as an act of interventionism, he has come out and wholeheartedly suggested that we are now going to go into Syria and change the regime, take Assad out. This is the language from Donald Trump, who just on Sunday, just a few days ago, said that we're not interested in regime change. Well, now the story has changed. That presents a problem for me in the sense of in my own personal dialectic in my brain, right? It really presents a problem for me because I want to know, I am so curious to know what happened. What did Donald Trump see? What did Donald Trump witness, experience? What was brought to him to make him change and make a complete 180 from being a non-interventionist to being, as far as regime change is concerned, and we'll discuss that and parse the difference there. What made him go from being a non-interventionist as far as regime change is concerned to being willing to start a war, to start America's involvement in the Civil War in a more committed fashion than Barack Obama? In fact, I say it like this because Donald Trump today reminds me of everything people feared the most of Hillary Clinton during the election, and the fear that we would go to war in Syria, which will ultimately lead to war against Russia. This was an ongoing debate during the election, and here we are. Donald Trump is parroting and saying the same exact thing that Hillary Clinton was saying. So this is Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State. These are his comments, and I want you to remember what he said last week, essentially asserting that we're not interested in regime change, but now this is where he's coming from.
Well, obviously, the events that have occurred in Syria with the chemical weapons attack here in the past day have just, I think, horrified all of us and brought to the front pages and to our television screens as well the tragedy that is part of the Syrian conflict. There is no doubt in our minds, and the information we have supports, that Syria, the Syrian regime under the leadership of President Bashar al-Assad are responsible for this attack. And I think further it is very important that the Russian government consider carefully their continued support for the Assad regime.
Sir, does Assad have to go?
Assad's role in the future is uncertain, clearly, and with the acts that he has taken,
Yeah.
it would seem that there would be no role for him to govern the Syrian people.
And so what
Okay.
steps is the United States prepared to take in order to remove him from power?
Well, the process by which Assad would leave is something that I think requires an international community effort,
Okay.
both to first defeat ISIS within Syria, to stabilize the Syrian country, to avoid further civil war, and then to work collectively with our partners around the world through a political process that would lead to Assad leaving.
So will you and President
All right, so that was a pretty lengthy clip, but I think it was worthwhile listening to it because this is a dramatic shift in policy for the Trump administration. There's really no way of looking at this other than saying this is a complete 180. Like, what in the world happened? And this is why I have a problem, right? I'm not saying it's a bad problem, a good problem. I'm just saying it really causes me to take a minute and pause and say, what changed Donald Trump from being and because Donald Trump is paying a political price domestically. He is going to pay a high political price domestically with his most fervent supporters, the alt-right, the far-right, the Alex Joneses of the world, the conspiracy theorists of the world, the biggest support base of Donald Trump. That remaining 34% that on yesterday or the day before that were the only people who still like Donald Trump in terms of his approval rating. Now they are turning on Donald Trump because he is actively promoting regime change in Syria. And I have to ask the question, why and what brought about that change? Here's some options, right? I don't want to just pose the rhetorical question. Here's some options of what actually could have happened. Donald Trump, for once in his administration, that looks ominous. Yeah, check my DMs. All right, let's see what's going on. Looks like there may be some breaking news here. And pause with me while I check this, and I'll finish that thought in a second. It may not be as important as what's happening right now. All right. The U.S. hit. The United States has, as breaking news right now, this is happening. The U.S. has hit aircraft and infrastructure, including a runway. No word on casualties yet, but no people were targeted. No Russian assets targeted. It was discussed earlier today that this attack was going to be imminent. We didn't realize imminent meant tonight. And so it looks like Donald Trump has not only shifted gears on what he was going to do. Donald Trump has actually now done it. He has, America has struck back against, or struck, actually is a proper language, has struck Syria. And I'm pulling up an article now from NBC News. The U.S. launches missiles at Syrian base after chemical weapons attack. I'll be reading directly from NBC News because this is happening at 9:15. This was published at 9:15. The United States launched dozens of cruise missiles Thursday night at a Syrian airfield in response to what it believes was the Syrian government's use of banned chemical weapons, blamed for having killed at least 100 people on Tuesday. The U.S. military officials have informed NBC News. I'm continuing to read from NBCnews.com. The U.S. military fired at least 50 Tomahawk missiles intended for a single target, which was an airport in the western province of Syria. The official said that the airfield from which the United States believes the airfield from which the United States believe the government of Syria, the president Bashar al-Assad, fired the banned weapons. So everything that we were talking about prior to the show, prior to this rather, has been academic. At this point, we have intervened in Syria. This does not mean, we don't really know how far this intervention is going to go. We don't know if this is is it limited to just this strike? Is this the level of reciprocity? Is this the appropriate response level of considered measured response by the Trump administration, or are they going to go further? This would be a great time to have a couple of experts here to discuss. We actually had a couple lined up, or we had one lined up tonight that he couldn't make it. But this is really the question: is Trump going to go further than this, or is this a response to an action taken by Syria to signal to them that we are going to take, or rather, you should take the United States seriously? Let's get your opinion on it. 857-600-0518. That's the best thing to do at this point because everything else has been rendered academic. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?